Okay, so I've actually started recording this again because I discovered I was wrong, right? Apparently you do need to have the bend, because otherwise moving this by default, it does not bend in any direction. So if you just ever so slightly bend it, ever so slightly, now it has got a hint as to which way its preferred bend angle will be. So yeah, you either model the thing so that it has slightly bent knees, or you have like, or instead of doing that, show you this example here. If I didn't bend the knees like that, I doubt I'll be able to get it perfectly straight. Now, yeah, it's hard to get it like perfectly straight. But you, instead of doing that, right, you could just, again, I don't know how I can show this because I can't get it back to being perfectly straight. Maybe this one's still, no. Instead of having a bend in the knees, I mean, that's imperceivable anyway. You can't really tell. But if you wanted to, like, if you had it perfectly straight by extruding down your leg, when you're creating the leg, you extrude straight down, so it's perfectly straight, right? But you still want to bend. Then when you create the IK, you create two sets of bones. One that is perfectly straight, that you parent your geometry to, and then, so fuck it, let's just do that. In fact, save some time. So I'll call this one thigh IK, and this one shin IK. Right, so as we've seen, these ones, you know, they have the bend in them, right? But then, let's say I extrude perfectly straight down, and then perfectly straight down again, so that they match up. Let's hide the thigh IK and the shin IK. Just move these off to the side so you can see clearly what's going on. Right, and then you would disconnect or clear the parent of that, and that one doesn't have a parent. And then you would, yeah, I think it's grab that one first, grab that one second, wrong way around. So grab that one, then that one, copy the rotation, and then see, they follow. I mean, obviously this is for demonstration purposes, right? So actually, fuck, you know what, I'll do copy location and copy rotation, but instead of doing world space, we'll do local space. So it still should, is that not right? There you go. Local with parent. So now you can see they started off perfectly straight, but now they're copying. The knees a bit mismatched there. But yeah, if you set back to pose mode, it would go back. Oh, I don't know. That probably, that might not work. What you could do though is you could parent these bones. Instead of using the constraints, you could parent these bones to these bones. Right? So these aren't disconnected, they're going to stay connected, and you wouldn't really need a copy location. That's what's fucking this up, I think. And this is getting its, again, so hold on, let's do local with parent. That's better. Right, so and it's off there, right? But if you were using parenting, if you had these bones parented to this is parented to this part here is never going to move away from this part because it's parented, it's directly a child of it, and then it's going to copy the rotation because it's a child of it. So this will always be lined up with this, and this will always be lined up with this. You might get some discrepancy, but you could then use damped track, and you could point this bone to the head, to the start of this bone. So then, even though it's directly parented to this bone, it will always be pointing to the start of the shin bone. Anyway, that's a fucking, we're on a tangent now, right? So let's go back to this, your Galactus mechanism. You got this, you move this shit around, because it's got an ever so slight imperceivable bend in it, it follows the target, right? You were saying, it flips around and stuff. That problem is caused by the target, the pole target is too close to this mechanism. So if I move this close, and I bring this up, it flips around, right? Easy fix. You grab this, you move it very far forward. I mean, it makes it ever so slightly more difficult to animate because now you've got to zoom out to grab that, but you also don't have to worry about the knee mechanism flipping around much. You could also put it higher and more far forward, and then it will always, because it's based on this bone here, this bone will always be pointing towards this. So that's good, right? That's problem one. We'll unhide this little mechanism here. Now you're saying you want this thing to, yeah, I'll just show you. Basically, I think this is basically what you want. You want to move that up and forward, and you kind of want it to stay, and then when you move it out, right? Now, ignoring this part here, this part is always, even though it's parented to the hip joint, yeah, the hip joint doesn't ever move, right? So the reason that this this is parented to a child of the hip joint does not move. This, and I've made the hip joint smaller, and it just sits there and it does nothing. That's got this parented to it. It's just for the static hips, right? This bone here is a child of the hip joint, and this bone has a transformation on it, right? And what this looks at is this thigh rotation bone here. Now, maybe I can replace this, I'll see. Which one would it be? Thigh left. Oh, wrong one. So this bone here, thigh rotation, let's see if thigh left works. Yeah, thigh left works. Okay, so what this is doing is it's looking at the rotation of the thigh bone on the x-axis, right? So that's the x-axis here, where the thigh rotation rotates around when he brings his thighs up or back when he's walking, right? It looks at the x-axis of that, and it applies it to the y-axis of this bone, and that's what this drop down here is. It says map to, as in whatever bone has this transformation applied on it, right? It's saying the target, the thigh bone, what am I looking at? What am I mapping from? The x-axis, as we've said, that's the bone that it goes across, and then you go down here and you say map to, and again you could like, it doesn't have to be rotation. You could move a bone around in world space, like like, I mean, I could have done it based on, yeah, I won't go into, I'll try to keep this simple. You can do it not just from rotation though, you can do it from scaling a controller bone or the movement in world space, like location, but we're using rotation, and we're saying minus 360 to 360, so you could do a full loop backwards or forwards, and then we're taking that and we're looking at our y axis, and we're saying the source of our y axis is that x axis. So this part here defines the ranges, right? And this part here defines what channels you're getting it from. And like I say, the ranges, it's like if I'd have put minus 180 to 180 here, it would move 2 times as fast. So fuck it, I'll just instead of so many words, not enough explanation, or not enough example, perhaps. So there you go. This is going to be fucked up now, but that's the point in what I'm trying to show you here. So if I set it back to default, that looks fine. Then if I bring it forward and up, right, and actually bring that back in, yeah, they've become misaligned because this is following. You know, I don't know what the, let's calculate. What's that? That's down, so that'd be 0. That would be 90 degrees. This is about 45 degrees. So this has moved. This is parented to the thigh bone, and it has rotated around the x-axis around 45 degrees. And this, using the transformation, and this is parented, sorry, I should have said this, to the hip joint roll mechanism bone that I'm talking about now. This bone, hip joint roll left, has the transformation on it. And because we've assigned this here, when it moves 180 degrees when the thigh moves 180 degrees on the x-axis, this bone will rotate around its y-axis 360 degrees, as in twice as much. And that's why this has moved 45, and this little nubbit here has moved blah blah blah. And the reason I've done minus 360 to 360 is because, yeah, you want it to be able to move anywhere. You know, if I had done minus 180 in both these boxes, this would stop short. So fuck it. Again, I will show you 180. So now they line up, which is nice. But then when we get up here, it might work actually, because minus 180 to 180 is a full rotation. There you go. Would you know? It does work. Take this as well. You know what? Let's take this. Let's move the cursor. Oh, fuck you. Move the cursor to there. Put the pivot point to the cursor. Let's grab this and let's rotate around the cursor. So let's see if it follows. So here is there. 180 will be up here somewhere, right? So we'll see if this trips balls. Ah, there you go. Okay, so in fact all you need is minus 180 to 180 to get full 360 degree rotation. Again though, let's example, if I had to put 90, because I started off with minus 1 and 1, and I was like, oh, that'll work, it just copied, but then it only actually moves 1 degree, and it will only, and that's the limit to which it copies. So 90 degrees, yeah, see, this part here will stop rotating at 90 degrees. There, you see that? It stops because we've done the full 90. If you look in the top left of the window, it says rotation. Oh, okay, it stops at 45, minus 45, which is fucking odd. I don't know why that is, that it stops at minus 45. On this side it goes round all the way to 160. That's kind of odd. Doesn't matter, the important part is minus 180 to 180, and then you map gives us the full range. And again, we're taking the thigh bone's X out the side there, which is being applied to the Y on this bone, which runs along the length of the bone. And that makes this little nubbit here, which is parented to that bone, rotate only on that axis, which is what you want. So that's one part done, right? That's your hip rotation sorted. Then you've got, turn this up so we can zoom out further. Right, so that works all the way around and everything's fine. Now you want to be able to move it out to the side. As you can see, that kind of works. I've basically started on that mechanism, but I was kind of lazy here. But what I did was, the thigh bone, I've made a child bone of the thigh bone. And this is a way you can do it. I've pointed it to look at the shin bone. Pardon me. So, sorry, move this back to rotate around yourself only. And turn off these locks. Because these locks here don't do anything for IK. These are just for you moving around in the thing. If you want to do IK locking, you have to go here into the bone. Yeah, these here are the same as these here, and they're just for transformation, aka you're transforming it, your ability to move it in the viewport. It doesn't affect the mechanism. What affects the mechanism is this part here. So, because these actually have an IK on them, and they're in a chain. You've got the ability to set stiffness on different axes and that sort of thing. So I mean, let's try that. Actually no, because the problem with doing this is then this starts to interfere with your ability to freely move the leg. So the leg will start wigging out and clipping about the plate. It will start jumping about because it won't be able to reach certain angles. So that's an option. Yeah, you can do this, and it will get you what you want, or it will try to get you what you want, because it will stop these bones bending on certain axes, but it will interfere with your ability to pose the IK chain, and it's not foolproof because it's just trying its best. So if you pose it in some weird pose and you say, oh, I want the knee pointing in this direction and I want the foot here, and it can't do that based on these things, it will either fuck up or it'll flip between really weird poses in frames of your animation stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't do that if I were you, but you can. It's an option. What I would do is what I've done with this bone with the transformation constraint, or like I said, drivers or dump track. So this bone here is a child of the thigh bone, so we want it to follow the thigh. So fuck it, let's just pose this. Okay, I'm lying, I've not made it. Have I not made it? No, it's a child of nothing. I was using these constraints. So this one here, or this one, sorry, points forward on the bone, or backwards, sorry. Let's move this out of the way. Minus Z, right? So, and it's talking about this bone here, and it's saying, because I think, yeah, if I push Z, it does that. We want that to be facing away from this, so it applies that first, and then it applies Y to be pointing at the shin. So if I move this up, it keeps keeps the z-axis always pointing away from this, and yeah, and then it applies this after. So if I take this off, you see, and move this out to there, or like I'm trying to give you a good example of what these are doing one by one. There you go. I guess that's good. If I try and rotate this around the vertical axes, because of this constraint here, it's always going to keep pointing forward towards that, so it's going to stay with this circle lined up with this to some degree. There you go, there's a good one. So allow it to rotate like that. But it kind of locks that to be aligned with that, and then this one overwrites it so that it's pointing there. But you can see that it's become misaligned there, which, you know, is not great. It's trying, but it's not great. And you could fix that by posing this, you know. But that's not a great solution. It's a start though. The other way to do it would be trying to think. If we move this up, and we move this knee off to the side, I guess the question would be, what do you want to happen? Right, I'm guessing you want this bone to roll around this angle like that, to keep that pointing in that direction. And so with that in mind, you could, because there's a million different ways to do everything, isn't there? So what you could do is you could grab this, take that 90 degrees around there, and this is me like off the top of my head here. So there's probably better ways to do this. So I don't want you thinking this is me saying this is the only way to do this. That is totally fucking wrong. Okay, see, so that points nicely like that. So there you go. Instead of having, let's put all these back on, set it back to the rest pose. So instead of doing whatever the fuck I was doing there, we could have this just copying that rotation. Let's just see if that actually, because I haven't even fucking tried that, does that actually work? No, because it becomes weirdly misaligned. So then you could grab this one, hide this one and this one, and then do the old damped track trick. Put that above that. Z direction. Is that going to work? There you go. Perfect. I mean, probably not perfect, but it seems pretty good. So there you go. It's copying the thigh locally. So always copy the thigh, and then this one here is correcting with the damp track, so it's pointing at this end of this funky bone. This funky bone is a child of this roll mechanism. Excuse me. So let's see if I'm now going to move this along the X, but I want to see. That looks pretty good. I feel like that's what you want, right? And like I say, I really can't say this enough. This is like one way to fix this. Or in fact, I think I've shown you two, right? I've shown you the transformation, which is copying one bone's weird angle, like one bone's rotation to another bone's rotation on a different axis. So this bone's thigh is getting copied to this bone's. Fucking idiot. Sorry. This bone's x-axis is getting copied to this bone's y-axis. So that's cool. Like, that's one way to copy a rotation and keep it limited to certain things. And again, maybe I should have gone over, like, these are all set to 0, so this bone's x-axis is not being affected because even though it's got set there, copy it from that, it doesn't matter, it's 0. Again, if we hover over it, bottom range of axes, destination motion. So, you know, it doesn't care. Don't affect the x-axis by any amount of degrees because it's 0. And the same with the z. Don't apply any z rotation to this because we don't want any. And so that's why, I mean, what I could have done is I could have set this to local with parent and I could have limited this. But this is turned off because it doesn't actually appear to matter because I've got it set to 0, so that's all gravy. And then this one, like I showed, instead of having some weird setup with transformation, I've just copied the rotation directly. Again, maybe I could have just said, don't bother with the Y and Z, just copy the X rotation. But I don't think that would work. But let's fucking try it out. I feel like this will become misaligned. So yeah, that's what happens if you just copy the X and the Z. I mean, it's doing a pretty good job. Oh, let's take that off. Okay, now that we've turned off the damp track, you can see it needs all three to keep an accurate, to keep these two aligned perfectly, which is what you want. But then the problem is, after you've got it aligned perfectly, you want to adjust it so that it's rotating along its Y, which you would use the damp track for, which says always point towards this end of the bone. Now, again, like I'm saying, I've shown you two ways. Instead of using the damp track, you could have used transformation here, and you could have said, look at this bone's X rotation and counter rotate by some degree in fucking blah. You know what I mean? You could do that, and that would mean that you wouldn't have to make extra bones that a target look at, so you would have less bones. But then you've still got a fairly complicated mechanism inside this transformation thing that you've got to set up, which I would have found to be a pain in the ass. So this is an easier way to do it. You just copy the rotation and then you adjust it or fix it with damp track after. Similarly, a third way, I didn't have to use copy rotation. I could have used multiple damp tracks, I think, which I think I tried before, but it was slightly less good as, right? But like, instead of copy rotation, I could have pointed the damp track towards this knee, and then pointed the damp track to, and then it would, if I point a damp track towards this knee, it's basically the same as a copy rotation. It's saying always look at this, except instead of -Z, it would be always look at the Y axes and always have it facing this knee position, and then I would have had another damp track exactly like this one here, fix it so that, because yeah, damp track with Y would end up looking pretty much like this, and then I would have one to fix it like this. And so there you go. Hopefully, because I feel like I've probably waffled for several hours now, that explains how you fix that and how you get some ways to do mechanical rigging that constrain it. And it, as you know, you have, like I pointed out, you can just do, under the bone settings, you've got this IK rollout here. You can limit it from rolling, from rotating in certain axes, and you can set the stiffness so and you can lock certain axes. See, so now it can't. Now this thigh bone can't rotate like that. It can only rotate out to the side. But that fucks with your overall control. This method here, even though it's much more complicated, to be fair, this allows you to pose it in any way you want, and yeah, you're not fighting the computer in order to, why won't it let me pose it this way? Oh, well, it's because you've got the weird fucked up settings here and it can't work out what you want to do. This way, the IK stays free, and these things here, these extra mechanism bones, which, you know, if I was being a good boy, I would prefix these with mechanism. And this is, there you go, I did it with that one, look at that. And this one would be mechanism, hip joint, what would this be? This would not be hip joint target, this would be thigh, start, because it's only for this bit here, front target, I guess, because that's what this is. This, we're using this bone solely, it's following this bone and it's maintaining where we want the front of this object to point towards, using this end of it here. If I can select that. Yeah, using this end of the bone. Anyway, I'm back to waffling, so I'm just going to save this and then I'll send it back to you along with this extremely fucking long video. Good luck if you end up watching.